There have been many important years in the history of rock music, and many of them can claim to being the most important or influential years ever. 1969 saw a little-known music festival called Woodstock take place, with its influence reverberating through both counter and pop culture for decades to come. 1970 brought about the end of the Beatles and the Doors. Both Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin died, and Black Sabbath would make their debut. 1984 saw the release of Prince's Purple Rain and Madonna's Like a Virgin. MTV aired Michael Jackson's Thriller for the very first time. There are plenty of other examples: 65, 71, 94, the list goes on. But the focus of this video is 1991, a very important year that would signal a new direction for rock music, as the glam and hair metal bands that achieved so much success in the 80s were about to step aside for the grunge rock revolution. As the world moved out of the 80s, a whole new generation of teens and young adults were looking for their identity, and much like the generations before them that had embraced the likes of rock and roll and disco, that identity would be found through music. 1991 gave us a ton of incredible releases from a number of different genres, but we are going to look at a specific 6-week period that just might be the most important 6 weeks in the history of rock music. It all starts on the 12th of August, when Metallica, the world's largest thrash metal band, would release the Black Album. Then, on the 27th, Pearl Jam released 10. A few weeks later, on September 17th, Guns N' Roses released Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. Then, on September 24th, we got the release of 3 albums all in one day: Soundgarden, Badmotorfinger, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, and Nirvana, Nevermind. The Black Album was Metallica's 5th record and saw a change in direction for the band, as the album would herald the departure from their speed metal roots, as we were presented with songs like Sad But True, The God That Failed, and Wherever I May Roam, that had a much slower but still heavy feel to them. There were 2 ballads in Nothing Else Matters and The Unforgiven, but it was Enter Sandman that originally got the fans hooked. The Black Album would catapult Metallica to new heights and would see them achieve a level of success that no metal band would ever surpass. Even today, 30 years later, the album reportedly still sells around 5,000 copies a week. The album did get some stick from the traditional thrash metal fans that didn't like seeing one of their favourite bands go mainstream, but this album helped introduce a whole new generation of people to metal. The Black Album is like a gateway drug. It eases you in with some nice radio-friendly metal. And from there, fans explore their back catalogue until they're hooked on the heavier stuff like Kill 'Em All and Master of Puppets. And from there, you start listening to the likes of Megadeth and Slayer. And from there, there's no turning back. Pearl Jam's 10 was their first record, and it delivered a sound that angst-ridden 90s teenagers would latch onto. That sound was grunge. Now, Pearl Jam may not have been the first grunge band, but the way in which they delivered this sound, influenced by classic rock rather than punk or metal, combined with a dark subject matter such as suicide and mental health, and topped off with Eddie Vedder's incredible vocal performance, set them apart from all the competition. The album produced 3 huge hits in Alive, Even Flow and Jeremy. My personal favourite was Black, a dark emotional journey into the mind of a man struggling with a breakup. And at the time, there was pressure from the record company to release this song as a single. However, the band refused, apparently stating that the song was too personal. Eddie Vedder is quoted as saying that fragile songs often get crushed by the business. The influence of this album cannot be overstated, as it would go on to provide inspiration for a generation of new artists attempting to replicate and build on this sound. Guns N' Roses had already changed the face of rock music with their 1987 record Appetite for Destruction, but they would be confirmed as one of rock's heavy hitters with the audacious release of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. The 2 CDs were released individually on the same day and had a combined running time of over 2.5 hours. Use Your Illusion 1 went in at number 2 on the billboards, sitting just behind Use Your Illusion 2 in the number 1 spot. They became the first artist to put out 2 records on the same day and claim the top 2 spots in the charts. What's even more impressive is that the album was even released at all, as the band were on the brink of imploding through most of its production, but they somehow managed to channel their creativity into what many would consider to be their magnum opus. Bands like Guns N' Roses were about to step aside for the likes of Pearl Jam and the grunge era, but in the autumn of 1991, Guns N' Roses ruled the world, and of all the albums I'm talking about today, Use Your Illusion may just have been the biggest instant hit of all of them. Then came the 24th of September, with 3 albums dropping all on the same day. Soundgarden had already released 2 albums by 1991, and it was clear to many at the time that with the breakout of the Seattle grunge scene, Soundgarden were perfectly placed to capitalise with the right record. That record was Badmotorfinger. The album presented to us a Soundgarden that had matured and refined their craft. No longer were they being compared to the likes of Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin. Badmotorfinger combined the band's heavy down-tuned guitar sound with the howling voice of Chris Cornell to startling effect. Nowhere is this seen better than on the chaotic single Jesus Christ Pose, with its complex arrangements and fearsome vocals. Of course, having the song banned from MTV would only do wonders for its popularity. Of all the albums mentioned today, I regularly listen to Badmotorfinger more than any other. The Red Hot Chili Peppers had been around for 8 years come 1991 and released 4 albums, but it's the release of Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic that would bring them international recognition and pave the way for the Red Hot Chili Peppers style that would bring them success for decades to come. Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic is definitely the most unique of all the albums mentioned today. Prior to its release, the band had switched record labels and brought in producer Rick Rubin, already known for his success with bands such as Slayer and Run DMC. Rubin recognised the talent of the band straight away and encouraged their creativity, bringing about a sound that features rock, rap, punk and funk. The album features an exciting mix of varied songs that weren't afraid to play with tempo. 1 minute, you're enjoying the melodic sounds of Breaking the Girl, and the next thing you know, you're grooving to the funky bass line of Give It Away. Most, however, will remember the album for Under the Bridge, a dark, haunting exploration into the battle with drug addiction. The song would highlight lead singer Anthony Kiedis' songwriting abilities, and to this day finds its way onto many lists detailing the greatest songs ever written. To put into context just how this album elevated the Red Hot Chili Peppers, consider that the following year they embarked on the Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic tour with Smashing Pumpkins, Pearl Jam and Nirvana as supporting acts. And that brings us nicely onto the last album, Nevermind by Nirvana. It's difficult to speak about this album in context with its place in history without being influenced by the zeitgeist of the subsequent years, but I think it's fair to say that of all the albums discussed, none are more popular than Nevermind. As I previously mentioned, rock music was on the cusp of a change in 1991, and the way history would tell it is that Nirvana was solely responsible for this change, although that is somewhat unfair on bands like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, who were all instrumental in bringing about this change. However, it can be said that the transition from glam to grunge probably wouldn't have happened in such a big way without the release of Nevermind, or more precisely, without the release of the single Smells Like Teen Spirit, as it was this song, aided by the popularity of its music video and MTV, that would help grunge find its way out of the subculture basement and into the realms of pop music, as it found its way into the homes of Middle America before taking on the world. But it would be unfair to say the success of this album was down to one song, as it's a fantastic album filled with great songs, and unlike Nirvana's other albums, it has an accessibility to it, featuring a much crisper sound and songs that were ideal for radio play. It highlighted Kurt Cobain's songwriting abilities, and many people today are quick to compare him to the likes of Lennon and McCartney. It's just unfortunate we never got to find out how great he could have been, as less than 3 years after the release of Nevermind, he would commit suicide, and one member of the band would go on to have his own unique influence on rock music in the years to come. What a way this was to end the summer of 1991 with the release of 6 albums that would go on to be considered as genre defining. 6 albums that any rock fan of a certain age will have in their collection. 6 albums whose influence can still be felt today. I mentioned earlier that grunge music was going to speak to a generation of people looking for an identity. There is a quote from Fight Club written by Chuck Palahniuk that may sum it up best. This was a generation that were lost, that didn't understand their place in the world or history. These feelings were reflected in the music of the time as a mirror of a disjointed, disenfranchised youth. Whether it was art imitating life or life imitating art, I'm not sure, but it was only natural that these feelings would manifest themselves in some form, and in this case, it was music. What are your thoughts on the most important moments in rock history? Have I oversold these 6 weeks, or would you agree on their relevance? What other periods do you think were important or influential? Let me know.